This is on the first house in your birth chart. So, the first house, what can we say? It's completely about the self, your identity, how you appear in the world. The archetypal expressions of the planets that are in your first house are going to be very prevalent themes in your life. So, for example, if you had the moon in the first house, not only is your appearance or your general energy that you present into the world going to be something that appears sensitive, vulnerable, emotional, moody, potentially, it will also represent this ongoing need to cultivate emotional security in your life that is basically a ever-present concern for you. And this may be something that you consciously need to put a lot of your own personal energy into to achieve in a way that makes you self-responsible for the creation of emotional security in your life. So planets in your first house are supercharged. If you have the sun in the first house, there is an extra present need for you to actually be seen and validated by others. And there may be something about your presence or appearance that is very magnetic, very apparent to other people, very attractive in some way. Similarly, Venus in the first house can be someone who is very Venusian, someone who conveys a lot of beauty or harmonizes with their environment in a very natural way. On the other hand, it can inflame a lot of the more indulgent aspects of Venus. So Venus in the first house can represent people who can be quite indulgent in the pursuit of pleasure in some way, or they may have a very particular intense need to have peace, beauty, harmony, and ease and comfort in their lives. First house is all about taking initiative to have our own particular needs met. So whatever that particular planet in your first house wants, Venus wants beauty, ease, comfort. The moon wants emotional security. Mars wants to pursue its passions. Jupiter wants knowledge, expansion, growth. Saturn wants greater structure and discipline and maturity and status. Whatever planet happens to be in your first house, all of the needs and traits of that planet, both good and bad, are intensified. And there is this real inner will and desire and motivation to create whatever that planet desires. Mercury in the first house, these can be people who are extremely inquisitive, curious, voracious to actually discover and uncover new information and knowledge. So these can be people who are very forthright in their pursuit of learning, and how they communicate with others can be orientated towards discerning facts, understanding multiple perspectives. If you have Mars in the first house, this can be someone who can come across in quite a passionate and potentially aggressive kind of way. These people are very focused on achieving their desires. So if you had Mars in the first house in Capricorn, for example, that's a lot of energy being put into achieving some kind of status in your life. If you have Mars in Cancer in the first house, this is putting a lot of passion and energy into your family life, your private life, and also being very forthright in how you go about achieving emotional security. So when we have multiple planets in the first house, in a large way, we are prioritizing our own wants and needs. And this can create conflict in other areas of our life where it would be more in our best interest to serve the interests of other people in some way. For the first house, the houses you have in conflict primarily are the 7th, the 4th, and the 10th. And with the 7th house, that's this area of life that's completely about relationships, the other. It's the perfect complement to the first house, which is entirely about the self. So if you had transits to the 7th house opposing your first house planets, for example, this may represent a period of time where a lot of this energy that is normally directed towards the self, it has to be shared and expressed in a fair, just way with other people in your life, or it may represent a time where you need to put more of your energy into other people's needs in some way. Whereas if you have birth planets in the 4th or 10th houses squaring your first house, or you're having transits from the 4th or 10th house to your first house, this can represent periods of time where the concerns of private and family life, 4th house, and the concerns of public life and career, 10th house, may in some way come in conflict with your own personal desires. When you have Jupiter in the first house, you can be someone that comes across quite confident, lovely, endearing, optimistic, someone happy, It's this positive energy of somebody who puts a lot of light into the world. It can almost also be someone who is constantly on that pursuit for a bigger vista in life, a new opportunity, someone who's constantly needing to grow in some way. If you have Saturn in the first house, you can come across as someone who is quite responsible or quite reserved in some way. These people can also convey a lot of authority, and it's essentially going to bring this need internally to basically be self-responsible for creating some kind of structure, success, or security in your life. Unlike a lot of planets in the first house, which can represent this kind of selfishness, this self-focus, not necessarily in a bad way, it's just like this energy orientated towards improving ourselves, focusing on our own personal goals, which can sometimes be, just the smart thing to do. And other times that can cause conflict with other people who have different needs in our lives as well. But Saturn in the first house can be this type of person who has a lot of this sense of duty and responsibility towards other people in some way that takes them away from their own needs. And basically, it's going to be this ongoing lesson for them to actually put more energy into the things that they desire for themselves, independently of the expectations or needs of others. Uranus in the first house, this can be someone whose general appearance or energy is quite different or eccentric or in some way against the status quo, which can present, challenges in your life where people who they judge you based on how you look or how you come across. And it can also be someone who is progressive in some way, someone who can actually, make other people realize that, there are other ways of presenting ourselves in the world. There are other ways of conducting our lives. Neptune in the first house can be quite sensitive people. These can be vulnerable people. They can be the types of people that pick up the energy of all of the people in their environment in a very, difficult to defend themselves kind of way. So it can leave them going into withdrawal and retreat at times because they're just so exposed to the other people around them in some way. And it can also be this sense of having this like dreamy quality to them, this creative quality to them as well. And it can also be the energy of someone who, is just like drawn to substances, drawn to things that basically take them into altered states of consciousness. And this is something that they can come across as. They can come across as someone who exists in an altered state of consciousness, even if they don't. Pluto in the first house can be the kinds of people who are very intense, of course. It's like they have put so much energy into just pursuing their desires, overcoming all their issues, really getting to the core of things, like dealing with things in a really serious way. So what this ends up meaning is that they can, repel other people at times because they're so insistent on doing things their own way, achieving their goals in their own particular way. And for a lot of Pluto in the first house souls, it's like they're going to need to, over time, open up to cooperating with others, maybe, actually pursuing other people's needs in some way and finding that when they open up to different ways of doing things and actually supporting others, that it actually becomes easier to basically serve their own needs and get the deeper security that they really crave. Chiron in the first house can relate to a sense of wounding when it comes to our identity or our ability to assert ourselves in the world, or feeling rejected for our appearance or how we just come across in general. So the other side of it is basically going to be someone who can be quite compassionate, empathetic, who can be a healer in some way. So this can be someone who, to actually overcome their own sense of wounding, they need to open up to actually providing support and healing for others in some way. And if you have the North Node in the first house, what this is basically saying is that what's comfortable for you, what's familiar for you, is basically going to relationships, looking after other people in some way and providing for their needs as a way of getting your own personal sense of emotional security needs met. But the North Node in the first house may find you throughout your life actually needing to come into, working out what it is that you really want, who you really are, what you're really about, and giving energy to those things. And through that process, you open up to a deeper sense of emotional security.